Right. Good evening, everybody. On a Wednesday night down here in a soggy Surrey. This is Arun Mehra here talking today. And tonight I'm going to be talking about selling your dental practice. Now, we've got quite a few people joining us from all over the place across the UK. Mainly sellers, but I'm sure there may be a few buyers who are sneaking in, listening in as well, which is, I guess, part of the course. Now, you might be thinking, I've had enough, I want to sell up and get out of dentistry, or want to hit the open road and take that camper van whilst it's very tempting. So today I'm going to talk about selling your practice in this current climate, the pitfalls, what's going on, an update on the marketplace, and how to maximize your value perhaps over the longer term. We all know it's an interesting time. The market's changing, a lot of changes in dentistry. So I'm going to walk through this over the next half an hour or so with this. I'm going to try and just add my colleague Christian on this call as well. Just bear with me a second. If I can find him somewhere, he's on this call. He's based in Rugby. Hi, Chris, can you hear me? I think you need to unmute. Is that going to work?
Hello?
Oh, hi, Chris, you there?
Yes, good evening.
Hi, brilliant. So Chris is new to our team. He's involved in helping clients sell their practices. And so if anyone is in the market of selling their practice, Chris will probably be the first port of call to discuss it with everybody. So say hello, Chris, to everybody.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you are well.
Brilliant. So we're going to run through these slides this evening. And we've got a good number of slides. And please feel free to ask questions as you go along through the chat, and I'll attempt to answer these as we go along. Okay, so let's crack on. So for those of you who don't know me, I've been around in the dental arena perhaps too many years, almost 20 years. I'm Arun, I'm a chartered accountant for the last 20 years, been running an accountancy firm for dentists. I'm the owner and CEO of Samera Business Advisors. We're a large accountancy firm for dentists. We are commercial finance brokers, FCA regulated, for people wanting to raise finance for people who want to buy, or to buy so they have finance, or asset finance, all that type of stuff. And then obviously we also do practice sales, which is what I'm going to be talking about tonight. I also own the Neem Tree Dental Group down in London and Surrey. And I've worked with dentists for, I think, more than 17 years. Trained chartered accountant, ex-VP of Bank of America, and I fell into dentistry because of my dear wife, Smita, and hence I've been in this sector for many years. But enough about me, let's crack on. So the question we keep getting is, now a good time to sell your dental practice? Is now a good time to sell your dental practice? Well, I'm going to run through this, and hopefully at the end of this presentation, you'll form your own opinion. And we can then go from there. So let's see if this moves. You may have seen this slide before when I did this variation of this presentation several months back. And in summary, we know the storm is not coming, it's happened, okay? COVID-19 has happened, and we're all still picking up the pieces in our respective businesses. I know many dentists are. And what we have to do as business owners, and if you're running your own clinic, is to adapt and get used to the new norm, which I know is much easier said than done. But in any disaster, there's always a disaster recovery that we have to get on with, and have to look at what's left standing, who is left standing, what can you salvage, and if possible, how can you turn things around. Now, I have many clients, and some are at different stages of this disaster recovery. Some are still twiddling their thumbs, worrying and not sure what to do. Others have managed to get up and open and running again, whether they're NHS or private. And then others I know who are literally making hay while the sun shines, in particular private practices I know who are doing very well, and are picking up the pieces from perhaps NHS practices in the area that may be closed or have a very limited market. The private practices are busy in those areas and with those clients that I've spoken to. So different for everybody and different in different geographical locations as well. More about this as I go on though. So during the process of rebuilding for UK or global dentistry, we've seen there's so much opportunity or need to change for new techniques, for new PPE, all that type of stuff, okay? New ideas, new patients, new team, new everything, okay? So let me just, bear with me a second, I'm just trying to switch something here. Okay. And so what we've got is a new way of doing things in dentistry. And for some, and I've spoken to lots of dentists, some people have said, you know what, I've had enough. Okay, I want to get out. But for others, you know what, they have to adapt. It's too early for them to hang up their drill, and they have to start thinking about how they're going to change and adapt. And this whole period of COVID is really all about change, and it's all about how to manage change within yourself, within your team, within your patient base. So it is a process of rebuilding, and it's going to take time, effort, and new ways of thinking about doing things. And I'm not going to talk about those new ways today. You're probably better qualified than I am to talk about it, but I've seen lots of practices, seen lots of ideas of where things are positive and change is happening. But I suppose why you're on this call today is, or why on this webinar today is, what about practice values? Okay, what's going on with practice values in the marketplace? And I have to stress it's really important to be careful who you listen to, because it's important. Now, I'm going to put my hands up here. We are, as I mentioned, we're accountants, we're finance people, and we are also brokers, okay? But I'd like to think we're trying to be as straight talking to our clients as possible to say, well, what we actually believe the market to be doing and what we think will happen. So hopefully that'll come clear as I move through these slides. But the most important point is to be careful who you actually listen to. So who are the people? So there are many people out there, many other brokers, other people who are telling you that values are remaining high. Now, these people tend to be sellers, people looking to sell, other sales agents trying to get their sales across the line, perhaps even recent buyers trying to justify their recent purchases, and buyers who have purchased at the peak of the market. All of these people are saying that the market is buoyant, the market is as strong as it was pre-COVID, and there's nothing to worry about, or there hasn't been any change in valuations, okay? That's what they are saying, all right? Not everybody, but there's a fair chunk of people saying that. And at the same time, there are people telling you that values have dropped. Future buyers, lenders, valuers, other brokers and other people in the industry. And of course, the vultures, and I use this slide a lot. There are vultures out there trying to buy things cheap, okay, saying the market's dropped, its market's changed. Now, I recall at the beginning of the pandemic, we had people calling at my wife's clinic saying, oh, the market's dropped, we want to buy your practices out. And obviously they'd offer a lowball price. We weren't interested. Those same vultures now seem to have disappeared, okay, but I'm sure they're still hovering around in the marketplace looking for cheap deals. What we've seen across the marketplace is a plethora of buyers registering with us, and I'm sure with other brokers out there wanting to buy practices. So I get registrations several daily, okay, from different people, from people inside dentistry, dentists, to people who aren't even dentists at all, who are looking to get into the sector, investors, those types of people. So there are lots of people who are looking to buy. But let's think about this first before we kind of make a better judgment or better idea or better understanding of where the market has gone. So in any practice or in the industry, we have to have had this change, as I mentioned. There's been investment in PPE, new infrastructure. We've had to change how you deliver dentistry, kind of fallow time appointments, social distancing in waiting rooms. Patients' requirements will differ. Patients may be fearful. Perhaps you've had to borrow finance to help you tide you through this time. All of these factors, all of these issues will impact profit and ultimately performance, okay? For sure, okay? But how you deal with these things and how you market and how you develop your business as a result of these changes will differ from practice to practice. Some practices will do really well, which I'm seeing a few are, but then some will struggle and some will not do so well, which ultimately impacts profit. So is dentistry special, you might be thinking? Well, not really. Investor appetite is, or investment or valuations ultimately are determined by future earnings and then applying a multiple to that figure. So if the profits are falling or the profits are declining because the sector's changed, but you're still applying the same multiple, ultimately valuations fall. So at the moment, it's quite unclear as to what future earnings will be for any type of practice out there. Now we've had from March till June, July time, practices closed, okay? Empty practices or no practices operating at all. So the income has obviously dropped. Now, as I mentioned, some practices have opened up on a very skeleton basis. Other practices opened up further and other practices are running full steam ahead, trying to maximize opportunities that may be there. Now, what we are seeing is some practices I mentioned are still closed. Some NHS practices, which are very reliant on private income, aren't necessarily being able to generate the private income, but they're still getting their NHS income and using that to pay associates and staff, etc. But delivery of dentistry has changed overnight, and ultimately furloughing is about to end at the end of October. Now, there may be some changes and maybe some new opportunities, which I read today that Rishi Sunak might say that, okay, you may be able to get another way to help staff, but sooner or later, furloughing is going to end, or a variation of it will end. And you have to be realistic. Can you sustain and run your business going forward into the future by growing your profits of the business? Because that's ultimately what you want to do. Because if, for instance, your profits, say, were £100,000 previously, and now they've dropped to £50,000 as a result of COVID, any sensible buyer will value it based on the £50,000, not the £100,000, because ultimately they're going to be looking at the future potential. Okay, now things might bounce back, but that bounce back is going to take a bit of time, okay, to filter through to the accounts, which will be used by valuers, by banks, and by ultimately buyers to determine the valuation. So, of course, people still need dentistry. People want dentistry. And there's still an appetite to, by investors to have cash sitting on the sidelines to invest in dentistry. But the market is different now. Now, pre-COVID, the opportunities, people were piling into dentistry, more and more investment, more and more money, whether it's in the UK market or beyond. I know on a global basis, dentistry was seen as a safe bet. Now, going forward, I still personally think it's a very safe bet, but COVID-19 has happened, okay? 100% has happened. And therefore, in my humble opinion, valuations have dropped. And I know getting a deal done across the line takes months, maybe up to 12 months, maybe even longer these days, okay, with CQC and all these types of things that are happening. And we won't see the real effect maybe until next year. But only if a practice has managed to bounce back will we start seeing pre-COVID levels of valuations. But in my humble opinion, valuations have dropped now. To what level? Difficult to say. You could say 20, 30% maybe an angle here. In speaking to banks who lend to the sector, they're still seeing activity, but they're seeing values are slightly lower, okay? But these deals are going through, but taking a little bit longer to happen. But there are opportunities out there for buyers, okay? If the practice, people who are selling, either keen to get out, had enough of doing dentistry, or they're, for instance, are desperate just to get out and they want to retire. But in summary, I think valuations have dropped. I think certain valuations or deals that were pre-COVID that were there are still going through and probably getting across the line because they may stack up well. But going forward, I think there is a little bit of hesitance out there, but not hugely, but it's about thinking, how can I make sure that I get the maximum value for my sale when I do sell my practice, whether it's in the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, etc. So, but what are we seeing currently? Well, to some extent, NHS practices perhaps aren't serving patient demands because they haven't got the availability to do it due to maybe some restrictions they have in place. And therefore, these NHS patients are certainly seeking private dental care. We've seen, as I mentioned earlier, a resurgence in private work in certain locations. And the first question has to be asked, is this short-lived? It may well be. But I've seen practices, private dentists who have limited resources are fast to adapt to the situation. And some of them have adapted very well, got their marketing right, got their messaging right, and with a great mindset managed to turn things around relatively rapidly and bounce back. And some are even doing better than they were pre-COVID, despite the restrictions and limitations and PPE and fallow time, etc. Why? Because they've managed to re-engineer their business model pretty swiftly to adapt to the situation and service patient demands. That might mean longer hours, that might mean increasing their prices, whatever it may be, but they've adapted. So the values ultimately are heavily dependent on the economy and investor appetite. We're seeing buyers and investors seeking to buy assets cheaply, but this is the point. If you're no rush, I personally think values will rise again to pre-COVID levels over the next couple of years. But I don't think it's a good time to sell unless you really are happy to sell at a discount, whether it's a small discount or a large discount. Alternatively, if you just do want to get out and you said, I've had enough of this, COVID or no COVID, I was planning to retire anyway, or I want to go and do something else, travel the world, get in my camper van, go and teach yoga, or whatever it might be, then fair enough, you can sell. But the reality of the situation is, I don't think you'll get the same value as you did pre-COVID. That's for sure. And anyone, if you do sell, if you're selling a larger practice, I'm sure there'll be larger tie-ins from buyers such as corporates to keep you there if they are even actually buying per se. So, excuse me. How does the valuation ultimately impact NHS or private practices differently? Well, that's a question that I've kind of trying to get across here. In terms of the NHS, on the NHS practices, we're seeing income is coming from the government. We'll certainly see that as a strong positive. And I know valuers and banks and everyone and investors have always seen that as a positive. But with the question we have to ask is, will the UDA terms remain the same going into next year? That's the first question. And similarly, as a NHS practitioner, many practices are obviously dependent on making up any deficiencies in NHS income with private income, but can they still make that work? Does it work now in their situation? So I suppose the question that has to be asked is, will the government ultimately change the contract to some variation? I'm just raising that question now. Personally, I think they will. There's so much change and so many issues that the government are facing. I think dentistry is just one more on their list where they potentially can knock a few quid off and make some savings, because that's what ultimately the Treasury will need to do, okay? We've seen how dentists were treated during the initial stages of COVID pretty poorly, and I can't see it improving going further down the line. It's not I suppose, a major priority for the government with all their messages that are going out there. So in my opinion, I think we'll be seeing change, and I don't think it'll be for the better for the valuations of it or for NHS practitioners. That's my opinion though. On the private side of things, certainly the first goal of any private clinic is to survive. And as I mentioned, some are doing well, but others are finding it hard. Some have found major cashflow issues, and banks have not been particularly supportive, and there was limited support for such practices as well from the government during the first stages of COVID. I suppose the whole point is the goal will be to ride out this period with sufficient cash to survive and then start up as soon as possible at speed. And I think that's where some people have done very well. They've milked the system, worked hard, and got patients through the door. It's important to think about the flexibility to your prices, to how you price services. And if practices can bounce back quickly, I think these private practices will benefit, but that will then have an impact on valuations. Maybe not immediately, but say until March next year, we'll see, and we get accounts up until March next year, then we'll see the valuation impact post March next year, when most clients or most dental practices get their accounts done to the end of March. But cash flow will be an issue, certainly for all practices, NHS and private, because I know tax bills or tax deferments that were made in July will now going to be impacting in January. So it could be a double whammy for many in tax-wise. So cash flow will be an issue, and so therefore cash flow has to be managed appropriately. So my personal thoughts on the valuation side of things, I think ultimately the smart and the savvy will prevail, whether they're private, NHS or mixed. Well-run practices, in my opinion, will prevail. Strong branding, strong team, mean a strong business with a strong valuation. In terms of NHS purely, it's totally unclear what happens next. And I suppose the point I really like to stress, and this is something I learned very early on in dealing with the NHS many years ago, is if you own an NHS clinic, you ultimately have one customer, the NHS. If they decide to change the terms, you're going to have a difficult time. So the risk management side is difficult. Whereas on a private side of things, you have many customers, but the risk side of that is you have to market, you have to do customer care, you have to get them through the door, which is another managing that risk. So it's all about risk management, and which camp do you sit in? There are risks certainly on both sides, but I think personally, I think NHS values are still unclear, mainly because we don't know what's going to happen next. Whereas private side, some practices, which good, strong businesses, will still remain valuable and will be desirable by vendors, purchasers. But ones that are struggling, well, they will struggle and potentially won't even have a value to them either. So moving on, that's my view in terms of valuation. So moving on, the key thing that you have to start thinking about as a practice owner is ultimately how these practices are valued. Now, you've probably heard this term Ebitda, and it's a well-used term now across the sector, and it's ultimately means earnings before interest, tax depreciation, and amortization. And effectively, it's the cash profit of the business, and it's an exercise that we would carry out, or an accountant would carry out, to calculate the value of that business, and then ultimately apply a multiple to this EBITDA figure. Prior to the pandemic, it was between 5 and 6 times was the norm. So for instance, if EBITDA was 100 grand, the valuation would be between 5 and 600,000 pounds, for argument's sake. So that's how practices are valued now. So the focus for you as a practice owner, if you're serious about selling, has to be about EBITDA. Okay, it's no point. And EBITDA is the number that, in terms of a valuation point of view. Now, focusing on EBITDA alone without good patient care and all of these other factors is tantamount to a disaster. So you need to make sure you've got all of the systems in place, the right people, the right team, the right marketing, the right clinical care to deliver at the same time whilst managing to develop a strong EBITDA or EBITDA growth alternative in addition. So in terms of how long does it take to sell, in my experience, well, I've got deals still going on, which are about 2 years at the moment. Okay, but typically now we're seeing up to 12 months for a quality practice if they do sell. And many practices, in my opinion, won't sell going forward, either because they're poor performing, or they're in areas which aren't so desirable to be in, or it's difficult to recruit for dentists. I think increasingly we'll see a glut of practices in the lower segment in certain locations because they're poor performing, so banks won't lend to them or buyers don't want to buy them, or in low population areas. I still think there are opportunities out there. If you see a practice which is in a good area but it's underperforming, that could be an opportunity for someone who wants to buy that if a seller's still wanting to get out. But then in terms of maximizing your value, this is where the focus has to be. Because I think it's going to take time to build your practice value or build your value up. And the bottom line is the focus on the EBITDA. The higher the EBITDA, the higher the valuation will be, as I mentioned earlier. Is it possible in this climate? Yeah, absolutely. It is possible. It's about changing things. And as I mentioned earlier, some practices and clients of mine I know are having the best days of their life at the moment. Okay. So we have quite a few clients who are focusing on growing in their EBITDA. But how are they doing that? How? Well, I think me as an accountant talking here, the first thing they're doing is having a very, very close eye on their accounting, and they know the numbers inside out. They know them well. They have the monthly accounts, monthly management accounts, have all the information at their fingertips, and it's done slickly, properly, and accurately. So one of the things we do for all our clients is Xero. We use Xero, we use HubDoc. Xero is an accountancy package, and HubDoc is an automated scanning software where the receipts and invoices are scanned into. and we then produce management accounts for these clients. This is, if you haven't got this in your practice, get it set up, okay? I cannot stress, in a time of financial problems, this is the number one thing you should be doing, not twiddling your thumbs. This is the thing, because you need to have information at your fingertips to make quality decisions. That's what it is, okay? You can see who you owe, what you owe. This is what you need to do. So if you need help getting this installed, come back to me, drop me an email, tell my team or whatever, okay? We can help you get this set up. Really, really, really important, okay? That's the first thing that the successful, strong practices are doing, whether they're mixed, NHS, private, they've got this set up properly and it's slick or operating well. The second one is these guys know their cash flow position. So they know how they're doing. They know what cash they're going to need at what point in time. So as I said earlier, I think we're going to see a cash crunch in January, when we're going to see tax bills paid for January, but also bills that were deferred in July that's gone past. There'll be furloughing ending. So all of these things happening will have a cash crunch on business. So you need to have your cash flow template up to date. If you haven't already, go to our raising.finance website and download that tool and run a cash flow forecast. If you don't know how to do, if you're not sure what to do, get in touch. We'll put a cash flow forecast for you together and help you manage your cash over the next 6 to 12 months. Because I think things are going to get harder before they're going to get easier. So know your cash position. And that's an example cash flow forecast. Won't dwell on it now, and there's a video on our YouTube page running through this spreadsheet, which you can download and play with and feel and do it yourself. But if you're not sure, get in touch. YouTube, I'll send you the link to YouTube later. The third aspect is managing the income and the receipts. And this is, again, back to cash, really, okay? Still so many practices aren't managing their cash collections particularly well. So therefore, making sure you have the necessary bad debt systems in place, making sure you get the deposits paid in advance before patients turn up, making sure that large treatments, you have the cash in before you actually even do the actual work. Getting up cash up front is key before you actually do anything. And even now it is, get the cash in. Make sure you have finance packages in place, such as under the Consumer Credit Act, where you can get all the balance paid up front, get the money in up front. Okay, so that's what these practices are doing as well. Selling higher treatment values and then making sure the cash is coming in. That's key. But then you're thinking, well, in this time, would I want to be spending on capital expenditure? Well, absolutely, because if it's going to help you, it's worth doing. I've had clients today just dropping me an email saying I need to invest buy an iTero machine. Great idea. If it's gonna add value to your business and you're going to help you sell more items and services, for sure. Okay. So if it's essential and you think it's going to add value to your business, think about hire purchasing or leasing or hiring, which could help. Okay. And it might be tax advantageous for you as well. So definitely the acid test ultimately is, can the money be more profitable used elsewhere? And if it can be by you buying an asset, great. If it can't be, don't buy the asset. But don't think about holding back. In many ways, now's the time to push harder on the pedal to grow your business. And CapEx is an important element to help customers, help the team, and deliver a more efficient, slicker service. And then number 5, really, and then again, this is a whole month's worth of content that I could talk about on this, but the guys who are doing it well are marketing like crazy, digital marketing, have the SEO, content being generated. They have the PPC, Google ads, Facebook ads, Instagram ads out there. And then at the same time, doing the social media well. And it's like, well, you're thinking, oh my God, how do I do this? Well, there are lots of people out there who can help, including ourselves. But ultimately in the market, if you're going to grow and you're going to succeed and you've got to grow that Ebitda, they're dominating the market where they operate within. If they're not dominating it, it's not worth doing. So you've got to dominate it. So if you're trying to be the Invisalign dentist for your location, dominate that location. And then really it has to be, without doubt, it's number 6 is focusing on building a high performing team. Identify the skills you're missing, get the right people in your business, and develop, motivate, and encourage from the team. You, as a business owner, have to lead from the front. Now is the time to be strong, and you need your team, but they also need you too to lead them. So important that they see and look up to you. If you've got the wrong people on the bus, I've said this hundreds upon hundreds of times over the years, get them off get the right people in, and then you push hard on that accelerator on that bus to get to where you want to get to. And where do you want to get to? Ultimately, building that EBITDA up again. If it's dropped, build it up and make it stronger and more resilient, and perhaps even more sustainable on a recurring basis. So my personal tips to kind of come to a close on this is focus on EBITDA growth, okay? That's what's going to get your valuation up. And all these other ideas I mentioned here, all of these things contribute to that, okay? Focusing on your team, the capital expenditure, the marketing, okay? But you've got to do it smart and you've got to do it cleverly, okay? In addition, spread your income profile. Don't have all your eggs in one basket. And this is where I've seen so many dentists come afoul of this, is all their income was based on dentistry, and overnight that dental income disappeared for months, and now they're trying to rebuild it. If you can, look at other income streams potentially for you, and I'll be releasing some information on this over the coming weeks and months of how to do that. Build a strong team. But I think this is an important aspect, is you've got to plan your exit, okay? If you're thinking of selling, it's not a matter of saying I've had enough and I want to sell up, okay? You've got to plan your exit. It's going to take 2 to 3 years before you do exit, and identify who would be a suitable buyer for you even before you start the process. Would it be a corporate? Would it be a young dentist? But build a business now so that in 2 or 3 years' time, you can exit. It's not going to happen overnight to sell your practice. People want to buy quality, okay? And they can be discerning. Or if they want to buy, if they don't want to buy quality, they want to buy very cheap, okay, which they can turn around. But they don't want to buy anything that's kind of plodding along, okay? They want to buy quality, and you can only sell quality. You can only sell at a high price if you've got quality in the first place. You've got a quality business at the same time. And then finally, you need to get yourself a support team that can help you achieve the above. Now, we work with all our clients as accountants, okay? We're a chartered accountancy firm dealing with lots of dentists. So we know, we have our conversations with our clients when they want to sell, maybe a year, 2, 3 years in advance, always having a conversation with them about it. Clients that come to me and say, I want to sell now, is a reactive situation. They haven't planned it. And I say to them, well, you can sell, but you won't get the best terms. Those who plan it and say, I'm going to sell in the next 3 years, what do we do about it? That's where we get involved and work with them over a period of time to ultimately focus on EBITDA, maximize EBITDA, and ultimately build the value in their business. That is so important. So you have to get yourself the right team. That team, in my opinion, is us, okay? We have a wealth of experience from myself, Christian, other team members, Nigel and Dan and Nathan, you name it. I've got loads of people, loads of experience in our team in this market. We'd like to think we're truly independent in practice sales. And I'd have to say, I think we offer the lowest fee in the UK market now in terms of selling practices. We charge a fee of 1.75% plus VAT on completion. And as I mentioned, we have so many buyers registered with us, and that's something we can do. And we handhold the vendors sale, but we're also very true and honest with people. If we think we can't sell the practice, or we think it's going to be a hard sell, we'll say, you know what, perhaps it's not right for us as well. Go away and do X, Y, Z, and we'll work with you with a plan to get it right to ultimately then help sell it in the future. And then on the flip side of that, as accountants, we can help you get your business in a strong position before you exit. That's kind of where we sit very uniquely in the marketplace. Remember, you need to build up to the sell, never be in a desperate situation or desperate position that you will need to sell your practice. If you do that, you're going to not get anything for it or get a rubbish price for your business. But if you build up to it and you have a timeline in mind, you'll be able to build something of significant value for your business. Okay, that's really, really key. So that's the kind of summary of today. I've spoken kind of flat out for 35 minutes. I'm not sure if there are any questions today, but before we go on, I want to just take you to this page for those people. I'm just going to go to this page here. Take you to this page here. I really want, for those people who are in that situation, they're not ready to sell yet, but they want to get the ball rolling to maximize their EBITDA. I would stress, kind of stress, you go to our free YouTube page, okay? there are absolutely tons of videos here, okay? And the ones that you want to look at are all things like selling your practice and ideas to guide to start selling your practices. There's past webinars, past recordings. There's plenty of webinars on here. Things like how to rank #1 on Google for your dental practice. Great ideas, great tips, financial hacks for your dental practice. There's loads on here, okay? So I cannot stress how important it is to learn new knowledge and implement that into your dental practice if you're really serious about maximizing the valuation of your business. If you're not, okay, I can safely say you're not going to get the best value for your exit. If you're not in a rush, don't be in a rush. Don't be pressurized into selling your practice quickly or now. If you can wait 12 months or so, perhaps wait it out. I would suggest you do. You perhaps will then get a much better price. It gives you time to regroup, change strategy, and perhaps come out even stronger from this COVID-19 pandemic. Hope that's helped today. I hope you found it interesting. If you need to get in touch, I will just push back onto the slides where they've gone. If you need to get in touch or have any questions, certainly reach out to myself on arun@samera.co.uk. Alternatively, reach out to Chris on chris.riley@samera.co.uk. In addition, on our website, samera.uk, if you want to have a chat about anything, you can book a virtual consult on the homepage. There's a link that says book a virtual consult, and we can then go from there. I've had a couple of questions. I knew there'd be some buyers on this. So one particular question, I'm not a seller, but I'm a potential buyer. What percentage of prices dropped? 10% or more? It's very difficult to give a real number to this. Okay, it ultimately depends on the demand for the practice, but I'd say anything between 5% and 25% really now. Okay, that's where the market has moved. And it's difficult because everything's on a case-by-case basis, but I think that would be a realistic range at this stage, okay? But for those sellers out there, as I've said, if you can hold on and you can build Ebitda again and have that accounting information presented in a slick format, ultimately, say from March next year, up to March next year and beyond, your valuations could be stronger. And I suppose one point I didn't get across here, when you're selling your practice, I suppose a really important thing that has to be considered is how you present the information. If the information is out of date or it's just a mess, you're never going to sell it. Present the information in a really kind of, in a really easy way for a buyer to look at it. That gives confidence to a buyer, gives confidence to a lender, gives confidence to a bank. If that's the case, that will certainly help your valuation. I've got another question here. What would be a fair time period be and how much normally retained? Good question. So we're seeing a range of things. We're seeing anything from 50, 60% paid out and retained to anything up to 70 to 80% paid out. It depends on deal to deal. A tie-in period, 2 to 3 years, maybe even up to 4 or 5 years. It's done on a deal by deal basis, okay? And again, every buyer will have a different risk profile. And if you've got a large practice and you're the predominant earner in that practice, they will probably say, I want to keep you on for a longer period of time to manage that transition. So maybe 4 or 5 years. If you're just a small income element of the whole larger practice, the time may be much, much smaller. So I've seen clients where they've had, I've had clients where they've had what's the called, the money paid out to them. Okay, but it's been the buyer or the vendor, sorry, has had to literally stay working for 5 years. Okay, to make sure that the transition has worked fair for the vendor, for the buyer, because of risk, and that's how the buyer. So that means going back to what the agreement, what the offers are. So as a broker, our job is to if you've got a practice to sell, is to try and find as many buyers out there, see what the deals they're offering, and then look at the best offer that's suitable for you. That's what we would do, okay, as a broker. And then I suppose another question, well, just to clarify, when I say people are paid out, so if a buyer is buying a practice, they may pay 50 to 60% of the total fee, of the total value, and the remainder is paid at, say, 10% on a 10% for the next 3 or 4 years. 10% is released each year. But again, it's done on a deal by deal basis, so it does vary very, very greatly from practice to practice and deal to deal. Okay, so I think I've got to wrap it up. I've been talking flat out for 40 minutes. I hope that's given you some food for thought, but on my last comment is to ultimately say, remember, EBITDA is the key here. And the key is not to have a static EBITDA, is to grow the EBITDA, even in this difficult time. If you can do that, that will be a practice that someone wants to buy or add value to even further. I hope you found it useful. You know where we are. We're only an email or a phone call away, and we can certainly help you in terms of accountancy, practice sales, or even finance if you're one of the buyers out there seeking to do that. Okay, thank you very much. Have a lovely evening. It's dinner time for me now, and I will speak to you soon, hopefully. Thanks.